Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch held their end of year press conference yesterday in Santa Clara. I'm going to go through all of my notes and give you my thoughts. It was a doozy, and also answer your questions next on the Jack Hammer Show. Hey, everybody, this is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Hope you're all doing well on this fine Thursday. The 49ers, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch holding their end-of-year press conference yesterday afternoon at Levi Stadium. And as I said in the opening, it was a doozy. There was some really good information I felt coming out of that. There was a couple of tense moments towards the end. Some good questions all around, good responses as well. A lot to chew on and get into. So let's pick it right up. Let me get situated here and get to the right spot, and we will start rolling through this. And the first topic is Brock Purdy and where he is and where the 49ers feel like he is as they enter into now it's going to be the surgery phase of this offseason for Brock Purdy because of the UCLA tear that he suffered on Sunday, on the sixth offensive play for the 49ers against the Eagles. I've already given my thoughts on the play. Go ahead, and if you have any questions on that, you can hit me up in the comment section, or just go ahead and take a look at the film breakdown that I did yesterday. We did about 20 to 30 minutes on just that opening 6 plays of the game, how it all kind of led up to the injury for Brock Purdy there. Even talked a little bit about some of the things that he maybe could have done a little bit better. Some other folks could have done better. Just really went into it as deep as possible. But if you have anything specific you'd like to ask, would be more than happy to answer it over here. Wanted to shout out really quick. We do have Black 59 Razor who says, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Love that name just because it always makes me want to yell out the audible from the Super Bowl. Which one was that? 24 with the highlights of Joe Montana in Super Bowl 24 against the Broncos. Lucas Pesci from Austria he's a member of the Toolbox. That's why he has a dollar sign there. He says, hey, Jack. Hey there, Lucas. Good to have you on board. We have E. Kim saying, hey, Jack. And then he has a question on Trent Williams, wants to know if I really see Trent Williams retiring this offseason. I'm going to get, into that a little bit in a minute as well. Daryl Q says, does Andy Reid get blamed for Mahomes' ankle injury? Seems not. Okay. We'll talk. I'll get into that one here in a minute as well, because that's really more towards the end of the press conference. But hey, let's just start off right there, because this has been a hot topic this week. The injury situation around the 49ers. Does Andy Reid get blamed for Mahomes' ankle injury? I don't think he does. I don't think he has a long history of his quarterbacks getting injured, which I think is why people are asking the question around the 49ers. Just the sheer number of injuries that have happened at that spot for the 49ers dating back to 2018. 2017, they were pretty injury-free. Then Jimmy Garoppolo hit. I think a lot of it probably has to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. When you look back at the injury history that you have there, don't really have a whole lot of injury history beyond that. Obviously, there was the UCL injury that was suffered by Nick Mullins in 2020 out in Dallas. Then you had the one here on Sunday. I think this year you look at the injuries, and I think they're, for the most part, they're freak injuries. Even the injury to the quarterback, Brock Purdy on Sunday. I don't know if I would say that I blame Kyle Shanahan for that. I don't like the play design. I don't like what they were doing there. I think it was a ill-timed play for that point in the game for the opponent that they were playing against. I didn't like the plan. But in terms of saying that his play call is why he was injured, I don't know that I would take it that far. I think that's a little far for me. It did lead to his quarterback getting hit, putting him in a vulnerable position. You look at all the different angles of that play. There was no way Brock Purdy gets that ball out without getting hit, whether it's from the front side by Fletcher Cox or Hassan Reddick, who did hit him, or if he steps up, the only place he can step up puts him right into the right into the path of Hargrave, number 97, looping around. He's going to blast him right there because the only place other than that he can step up is to climb onto the back of Trent Williams, which isn't what he's going to do. So regardless, he's going to get hit. He's going to get hit hard in that play. That's what football is, though. And to say that if he steps up and throws the ball that it's a completion, it's going to be a touchdown. Again, that's taking things a little far because he is going to be getting hit. And so when Hargrave hits him, does that affect the throw? Those kinds of things. A lot goes into it. But as far as blaming Kyle Shanahan for the injury, I don't think I really blame him for the injury. I just don't like the play call, don't like the play design based on the opponent. I know it's a play that the 49ers run a lot, which isn't a problem. But when you're playing against an opponent that attacks as much as the Philadelphia Eagles do and attacks the way that they were in those first 5 plays leading up to that, you would have noticed that was an issue. That would be an issue, that the length of time that it was going to take to get that off might be a little bit of a problem. They didn't. They ran the play. They came back to it the next 2nd and 6, which was just 2 plays later. Tried another play action similar to it, a little bit different though, not asking the tight end, not having the same kind of alignment, but they tried to get a little cute with it. Something that they do again against teams that aren't as fast as Philadelphia, that works against teams that aren't as fast. And actually, if you go back to the film, Niners struggled a lot with naked boots to their left side, to their either side, with defenders getting upfield extremely quick. If I had the time to go through, there's actually a short cut up on Twitter from somebody that does a lot of 49ers content in terms of videos showing how defenses are attacking the edges of Shanahan's scheme this year to force them not to be able to roll out and give them those free shots. It also happens to be somebody who is now defending Shanahan for the play call and all those types of things. So again, it goes in all kinds of different directions. And if you really want to get my full thoughts on it, take a look at the film review. But again, as far as blaming Kyle Shanahan for the injury itself, the injury to Brock Purdy, I don't want to say blame him for that. He put him in a compromising situation regardless, because whether it's going to be hit by 7 or 97 or 91, he is going to be getting hit at the point in which he throws that ball regardless. And I understand it's the NFL. So let's move off of that just for a minute. And let's get back to the injury question that we were talking about with Brock Purdy. So they're still, according to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they're still continuing to work through the options there. They really feel strongly that it's going to be that 6-month plan, not the Tommy John 12-month plan. And what they really like about that 6-month plan is that it's 6 months he's ready to come back and work. It's not 6 months of rehabbing and then getting back from that and then having to build up the strength. The plan, if everything looks good, once they get in there and they're able to do what they call it's an internal brace that they're putting inside of there. What that would do was that would be about 3 months of rehab, and then you get about 3 months of building up the strength, so that by the time 6 months comes around, he'd be expected to be able to go out and play at full speed without any restrictions. So again, that's where they are right now. Sounds a little bit of I wouldn't say pie in the sky, but that's definitely the positive version of it. And there is a negative in which it would be a longer term. But it seems like right now the 49ers are feeling pretty good about it. We've seen them in this situation before, so we'll see how it really plays out. They're also asked about Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. And I know this is a big piece, something that's really we're seeing a lot of when it comes to the 49ers community. What's going to happen there? And they're asked about it. And Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, both stating that they are content with having Brock Purdy and Trey Lance as their quarterbacks. They feel like they have 2 starting level quarterbacks, which would rule out them going out and getting a high profile free agent this offseason at the quarterback position. It doesn't surprise me, especially when you start to look at the salary cap situation the 49ers are under. They have a lot of their own guys they need to re-sign. There are going to be some restructures to help open up some free cap space. I would expect to see them bring some guys in. They're not going to go into the offseason program with only having Trey Lance as their only available quarterback. They're going to be bringing somebody in before that. So there will be a guy signed. There will be maybe even a quarterback drafted this offseason. So There'll be some movement around that, but as far as the high profile top level guys, that's not going to happen. As far as Lance goes, they do feel like he's going to be full go by the start of the workouts, phase 1. When that opens up, he'll be ready to go. And I don't think that's a surprise. He had said the day before that he was about 3 to 4 weeks out on being able to really get going again. So that's good news for the 49ers. Trey Lance went into last offseason as QB1. So, the questions around the 49er quarterback position are, they have one guy that should be healthy. It should be Trey Lance. And then we don't know yet about Brock Purdy. There's going to be some other people added. We'll find that out as we go through it. Just looking at some of the other things in terms of the Lance and Purdy question. Like I said, full go by workouts. They don't feel like there's going to be, there's not much of an approach as far as right now, because they only have one guy and the other can't do anything. So there's not much to really look at as far as getting ready for that. There will be some guys brought in, like I said. As far as the competition, that's going to play itself out, which is good to hear. If Brock Purdy is healthy, you're going to have a lively quarterback competition. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's people on both sides of this who are very pro Brock Purdy, and there's other people that are very pro Trey Lance. And I must say that I do find it a little interesting that the pro Trey Lance group, the people that have been pro Trey Lance from day one, kind of getting into their feelings a little bit, it seems like right now. I don't really know why. He's going to have a shot to win the job, just like he had a shot to win the job in 2021. He was given the job in 2022. Would have been the starter all year long until he injured himself. Well, until he got injured. He didn't injure himself, but he got injured. That was a bad slip by myself, so apologize for that. But until he got injured, so I don't understand why you have to defend it. It's going to play out on the field. If he's the best guy, he will be the starter. If he's not the best guy, he won't be. So it's a pretty easy discussion, I think, from at least from the standpoint where I'm coming from on that whole thing. Let's see. There was a question that I want to. There's some other questions over here in the comment section I'm going to get to, but before I do that, I do want to just finish my thought process on this whole Brock Purdy versus Trey Lance, and it comes up from a mailbag question. I'd asked for some mailbag questions over on Twitter. They were going to go into the article. I didn't get very many that I felt like would fit. There was a lot of good questions, but in terms of a mailbag with quick hitting answers, some of them actually are going to end up being their own articles over the course of the offseason. And then in the coming weeks. But AW said, what does Brock Purdy do that Trey Lance cannot? What makes Purdy an upgrade over Lance next season? So you look at this one, and what does Brock Purdy do that Trey Lance cannot? There's not a whole lot that I would say he does that Lance cannot. I think you look at these two from a physical standpoint. Trey Lance is a much bigger person. He's faster when it gets to the top range. I think that if the one thing we don't know is Trey Lance never ran the 40. They didn't have a combine, so we don't know what his 40 splits are and all those kind of things. Just watching them play, though, I would say that if we lined up Brock Purdy and Trey Lance next to each other and asked them to run a 40-yard dash, and we decided that 10 yards, whoever was ahead at 10 yards is going to be the guy that wins the race instead of what happens at the 40-yard mark, without telling them that Brock Purdy would win that race. I think Brock Purdy is a little bit quicker off the start. I think as he builds up speed, Trey Lance gets faster, but I think there's a quick twitch about Brock Purdy that Trey Lance doesn't have. I think that's one of them. But getting into the what makes Purdy an upgrade over Lance? I think that's that's a better part of this question, because can't really say there's a whole lot. I think the difference here and what makes Purdy an upgrade over Lance is consistency. You know what you're going to get out of Brock Purdy. When Kyle Shanahan calls a play, he knows where the ball's going to go, or he has a good feeling for what's going to happen. I don't think he has that with Trey Lance. I also think that with Purdy, you get better accuracy in the short range, in that 10, 15 and under range. I think you get better accuracy with Brock Purdy than you do with Trey Lance. And it's definitely more consistency. I can go through the film and show you. We can definitely go through the film and pick out some some plays that show Trey Lance making all the throws that Brock Purdy's made. You're not going to see it happen quite as often. And some of that's in games and some of it's on the practice field. When I have this conversation, a lot of times when I have discussions about Trey Lance, people get really upset with it because the argument is we haven't seen enough of him. And I understand that from a game standpoint. We haven't seen enough of him on the field in a game. The difference is I've seen a lot of Trey Lance because of the practices that I get to see during training camp. This last season, I saw every training camp practice other than the practices out in Minnesota. And so saw a lot of throws. Saw a lot of throws last year in training camp. See the throws that they're making during the regular season, during the early portion of practice, which is usually just warm-up throws and that kind of stuff, but it still kind of gives you a little bit of idea as far as accuracy and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of it, and I think I've seen more than the majority of fans. And what I can say is that there's a lack of consistency with Trey Lance that Brock Purdy doesn't necessarily have. I felt like even in the training camp sessions last year, there was some talk about Purdy doing well. I thought I've definitely felt like Brock Purdy was doing better than people thought. When I was impressed with his ability to move the offense in the preseason, the thing that always held me back with really thinking he was doing, going to be able to do what we saw him do was the turnovers during preseason games. If you remember those 3 preseason games, Brock Purdy always moved the offense. But it seemed like more often than not, and maybe I'm overstating a little bit, but it seemed like more often than not, as he was moving the offense along, he'd make a mistake, throw a bad ball, and it would get picked off, that type of thing. Once he got in and he stepped into the starter's role, those things went away. You also had, he's playing with a higher level of player, and so that helps out as well. There's a lot of things that go into it. But I think what makes, if we want to say one thing, I think the Purdy is an upgrade over Lance based on consistency and accuracy in that middle range, 15 and in. Start getting over that, it gets a little bit. He's not the best down the field thrower, but from 15 yards in, he does a really good job for the most part of putting the ball where it's supposed to be more consistently than Trey Lance. So that's the answer there to AW. Hopefully you're checking this out because it is live on Twitter, so you can see it over there. And if not, I'll be breaking this thing up into different pieces so people can check it out over the coming days. So that's the part on Trey Lance. I want to get into some of the other questions as well. Let me just kind of take a look over here. There's a lot of questions coming in. Peter Lee saying, "Hey Jack, finally have to hop in. Good to have you here. We're going to get into the defensive tackles and stuff. We're going to get into some of these other guys." Daryl says that he feels like Purdy cemented his status after the Cowboys game. I think that if you watch that game and you come away with anything other than Brock Purdy as a starting level quarterback, I would question what you're watching. He played very well in that game. As far as cementing his status after the Cowboys game, yeah, that's the kind of game that you're looking for a quarterback to be able to play in and show that they can stick it through. That was a really good game I felt from him. Shirazi says, "Did you buy Mike Silver's article that Purdy would be named the starter next year prior to him getting injured?" Yes, I did. Everything that Purdy was doing was leading towards that. If Purdy, they played on Sunday, they lose that game, but Purdy's healthy throughout, but they still fall short. We're not even having this question about Trey Lance and him really in terms of there'd be a competition, but Brock Purdy would go into that competition as QB1 with Trey Lance as QB2. I think that's partly why we're seeing on the Twitter space of this, the comments that we're seeing from the people that are very pro Trey Lance, because I think what's happening is they don't feel like he's being respected because people are like, oh man, Trey Lance, Brock Purdy's injured. This is a bummer and all those kind of things. I think that all kind of plays into it. There's been they feel like he's been disrespected. I mean, for when it comes to Trey Lance, what I'll say is he wasn't the starting quarterback in 2021 because he didn't beat out Jimmy Garoppolo. He had a chance in training camp, specifically heading into the week down in Los Angeles and those joint practices with the Chargers. He had a chance to earn that starting quarterback job. He didn't capitalize on it, but they still liked him enough to where they were still trying to rotate him in there with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think, even through that Raiders preseason game, even through week 1 to an extent, and then it stopped because I think they realized that they needed to just make a decision on one guy. I think if you've watched the Joe Montana documentary, for those of you that weren't around during that time, if you're not an old guy like me, and for those of you that were, you know that one of the big reasons why that 1988 team was able to write it and get into the Super Bowl was because they made a decision at quarterback and stopped going back and forth between Steve Young and Joe Montana. I think that's what we saw here with the San Francisco 49ers last year. They made a decision. They stuck with it. Trey Lance got his opportunity when Jimmy Garoppolo went down against Seattle. Played much better than his stats would show, I think, against a good defense in Arizona, but still had some mistakes that you can't really have. It hurt the team. And they did struggle to score points. And then he injured himself. And there was a point there, even leading into that next week against Indianapolis, where Kyle Shanahan said, we thought this was going to continue on a little bit here. I think they were ready because of the injury that Jimmy Garoppolo suffered with his calf, that they were ready to give Lance some run and give Lance really an opportunity to take the job. But then he got hurt, wasn't able to come back. Jimmy Garoppolo got back in. They started rolling. You stick with the number one guy because you have to have a plan, and so that's why they stuck with him. Lance played well in Week 17. Week 18, Garoppolo's healthy again, so you go back to him, and then he runs through the playoffs and struggles in the NFC Championship game, though, and you lose. So it's a fun conversation. But really, when you think about that in 2022, Lance was the guy. This was supposed to be Lance's year to develop. Supposed to be Lance's year to get into the system and do the things they do. It was an unfortunate injury against Seattle. And when you go back and you look at that game, you look at all the talk, you hear what people have said. Kyle Shanahan's of the belief. It's clear because he said it outright yesterday that they feel like Trey Lance is a dual threat quarterback. If you don't want to believe that, then go argue with Kyle Shanahan. You're not going to win it, but that's how he feels about what Trey Lance is. So we'll see how that affects his career moving forward. Let's go. There was a question over here that I wanted to get into because it leads right into the next one. And it was from Ekim. And he asked, do you really see Trent Williams retiring this offseason? That was my next topic was going to be Trent Williams. There was some discussion of Trent Williams on Tuesday afternoon about Trent Williams not committing to coming back for 2023 because of the amount of, how physical it is, the time that it takes to get yourself ready and all the physicality everything that goes into it. And yesterday, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch asked about that. They feel like you will see Trent Williams back next year. So in their words, they expect him back. At least Kyle Shanahan said that he does. So we'll see how that plays out from there. I think, Daryl, you're asking, was that play ever used in the regular season? You're probably going back to the play that Purdy got hurt on. I'd say it probably was. I don't think that part of some of what I've said already on this channel, I'll repeat it again, is there's things that work during the season against certain levels of teams that aren't going to work when you're playing the better teams. And so the slow developing play action stuff that works well against, in week 2 against Seattle isn't going to work necessarily in an NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles because there's just a level of different level of competition that you're playing against. And so I think all those things need to be weighed into, and that's what happened on that one. Let me take a look really quick. going back to the Trent Williams thing, though, like I said, they expect him to back him, but that leads us into the offensive line question, because there's been a lot of discussion around that offensive line this year. A lot of questions on that. There's a thought process that the 49ers offensive line isn't that good, or isn't as good as advertised, or isn't as good as their numbers are, or something like that. This was the 49ers offensive line that had a all-pro left tackle, had a first-year starter at left guard, a first-year starter at center, a rookie starting at right guard, and a tackle player at right tackle coming off of a quad tendon tear from the year before, an injury which a lot of offensive linemen don't come back from. And they were able to go out and win 15 games with that offensive line. Not only were they able to win 15 games with that offensive line, they were able to go out and give up a lower percentage of sacks than they did last year. They were able to improve their yards per rush attempt by nearly a full half yard. The 49ers offensive line was very good in 2022. Question it because the number one pass rushing defense of the Philadelphia Eagles, a defense that ended up with the third most sacks in the history of the NFL since they started recording sacks as a stat in 1982. And all of a sudden using that to suggest that this 49ers offensive line wasn't as good as their stats is, to me, beyond ridiculous. Now, can you question some of the players on that? I guess. I mean, Spencer Burford's a rookie. You're going to have some misses from a rookie. Jake Brendel's never started before, so you're going to have some misses there. You're going to have one thing, if you're going to complain about this offensive line, is they weren't the best when it came to from straight up man on power blocking. They needed to get into a little bit more angles and those kind of things, but they were pretty good, and I think they're in a good spot moving forward. You just kind of look at the way that they've been building this thing, and there's this offensive line again. The numbers tell you that they're very good. The one game that they really struggled in, again, Philadelphia. We don't know how that game would have played out. It started off really well when they were running their quick stuff in the beginning. Brock Purdy had two clean pockets and ripped in the throws, and then they went into a couple of play actions, and he got. He was injured, and they came back, and the next play they tried to throw the ball on was 2 plays later, another 2nd and 6, and Josh Johnson got smacked, and then you saw the offensive line kind of struggled a little bit there, but they were still able to tie the game up, and the offensive line didn't lose the game for them. That's for being sure. Rashad Shirazi comes in. He wants to know if can Burford take over at right tackle for Mclinchey. Do we need to re-sign Mclinchey? That goes right along with the next question that I'm going to bring up from the mailbag questions that I reached out for, and it was Zach Mann said, should the Friars sign a right tackle, draft one, or start Colton McKivitz, Jalen Moore, or re-sign Mike Mclinchey? And my response to this is, my first choice would be to re-sign Mike Mclinchey. I know that's a tough ask, though, because of their current salary cap situation. If you look at what Pro Football Focus, they rank him, Mike Mclinchey, as the number 10 free agent on the market this year. They think that he should get a 4-year, $62 million contract with $37.25 million guaranteed. That $62 million over 4 years comes out to $15.5 million per year. When I look at this, the way that I look at it is, in 2022, Mike Mclinchey's salary cap hit was $10.88 million. He played at a level that put him among the top 10 right tackles in the NFL. That's why he's going to make so much money. That's why they're projecting him to be so high. His pass protection sack percentage rating actually dropped over the last 2 years. When you look at the numbers, 4 years, $62 million, with $37.25 million guaranteed, depending on how the signing bonus and things like that work. I believe the 49ers would be able to bring him back at a lower cap hit than what they had of him last year. It would be probably in the $9 million range in 2023. Obviously escalating after that, but the salary cap is also going to escalate. So if they could bring back Mike Mclinchey, I think that is the first thing to do. The best course of action would be to bring back Mike Mclinchey. He's a proven veteran that does a very good job with what they ask him to do. Number two, as far as drafting a right tackle, I don't know if you're going to get a draft. You're not going to get a right tackle in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that's going to play at the level that you've gotten from Mike Mclinchey over the last 2 years. You're not going to get a player in the draft this year at that spot that's going to give you the productivity that Mike Mclinchey gave you in 2022 for sure. As far as signing a right tackle, again, depends on what you want to do there. Remember, it was $10.88 million. I think you can get probably around 9.5 with if you keep Mclinchey on that 4-year deal, kind of keeping him on the low end of the salary cap to start off with, ramping it up as it goes along. Is there a veteran out there that's going to be an upgrade over Mike Mclinchey that's going to be cheaper? I don't think so. I've seen a couple of names thrown out, and they're not guys that I believe are better than Mike Mclinchey. So there's that. As far as drafting one, it's always a good idea to draft tackles. Starting Colton McKivitz or Jalen Moore, out of those two, if you're looking at one of those two starting next year at right tackle in place of Mike Mclinchey, it's Colton McKivitz. He is the better player between himself and Jalen Moore. That's Colton McKivitz. With Colton McKivitz, you get a guy who is probably a slight upgrade in the run blocking over Mclinchey, a little bit faster. But in terms of pass protection, I would say he's a step down. So all in all, just a slightly lower player than Mclinchey. But again, the options here, if you're trying to upgrade that spot, there's not a whole lot of direction that you can go. You don't have a high-level draft pick. That's eaten up by the quarterback that you drafted in 2021. You don't have a second rounder because you don't have a bunch of picks because of Christian McCaffrey as well, which I think is worth it. So we'll see what they decide to do here. I think you're going to see some restructuring. That I think it's an outside chance that Mike Mclinchey comes back, but because he's got a pretty good number that he's going to try to hit, and not that he's said anything to me about that, but just based off of what I think he's going to be able to pick up on the market. So in terms of what they should do at right tackle, re-sign Mike Mclinchey, go ahead and start Colton McKivitz, sign a right tackle, draft one. And I'm saying that in terms of to be your starter for next year. Mclinchey's the best guy, and so on. Ian Sharp says if they keep him, Ward is probably gone. Jimmy Ward's not coming back. Jimmy Ward's not going to be a member of the 49ers after this year. He was pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear. I think he likes the team. He's not going to be back. He's likely going to get far more money than what the 49ers are willing to pay him at this point in his career. Had a good year, though. Definitely had a solid year. Let me just take a second here. They got Fred Warner in the 3rd round, and they're going to get picks from D'Amico signing. Yeah. I don't know if you can really. I mean, when you look at they do have 3rd rounders for those guys. You got to remember the picks that they're getting for these compensatory picks that they're getting for the coaches signing elsewhere. Those are at the end of the round, so it's basically like early. They call them 3rd rounders because of their comp picks, but it's the positioning is basically a 4th, right? Still, it's end of 3rd because of the comp stuff. It's outside of the normal pattern. It's really an early 4th, and they could the likelihood of getting a Fred Warner. Maybe 49ers do a good job in those middle rounds, but I don't know. That's the other part too. I would say when we go to going back to the whole Trey Lance needs to start and they're going to pay for it. You look at that and they gave up a bunch of stuff and they still got 2 starters out of this draft. They got a starting quarterback and they got a starting right guard. and they got some guys who I think will help them out next year. We'll see. As far as the defensive coordinator position, we got a little bit of clarity on this yesterday or earlier this morning. Vic Fangio will not be coming to the 49ers. He is not going to be the new defensive coordinator. D'Amico Ryan's getting that head coaching job out in Houston. Had a fantastic press conference, I understand, today for his introductory press conference. Good luck to D'Amico Ryan's with the Houston Texans. We'll talk about that more down the road. In terms of who's going to be the new defensive coordinator for the 49ers, Vic Fangio out. I think when you look at that position, that there's a few names that have been linked to the 49ers now with him out of the picture. It's Chris Harris, who is with the Washington Commanders. He's a defensive backs secondary coach over there. Steve Wilks, who has been a head coach in the NFL, has been a defensive coordinator as well. And then there's also the rumor that they are looking at the possibility of promoting Chris Kosarik, who is their defensive line coach. The promoting Kosarik is an interesting one because Chris Kosarik has never said that he wants to be a defensive coordinator. He's actually said the opposite. He said that he likes coaching the defensive linemen, and that's what he loves to do. And so in terms of Chris Kosarik becoming the defensive coordinator, I think that would be quite interesting. Definitely a change from what we've heard from him in the past. But, people's minds change over time. The other thing there is, Kosarik becomes the defense coordinator. His assistant steps into that defensive line role. It makes it kind of a smooth transition. The Steve Wilks piece, I really like the thought of Steve Wilks being the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Wilks is a guy who you look at what Wilks did out in Carolina this year when he was able to become the interim head coach. He strikes me as a guy who is a leader of men, which is always kind of what you talk about when it comes to coaches. Can they be? How are they at leading players? How are they at getting their players to play for them? Being a smart coach is a part of it also, but how are they with the players? And everything that I have read and heard about and kind of seen when it comes to Steve Wilks tells me that he's going to be a very good defensive coordinator. So if the Flyers are able to go that route and he becomes the new defensive coordinator, that would be fantastic. Black 59 Razor says Corey Undlin will be the new DC. Undlin also has a history of being a defensive coordinator. He was a defensive coordinator, I believe, in Detroit prior to joining the 49ers in his current position in the secondary. So that one, again, that's a name that I believe has been thrown out in conjunction with possibly going out to Houston. So there you go. That's another name of somebody that could slide into that defensive coordinator role here in San Francisco. So that's a good one as well. Ian Sharp wants to ask about, does Elijah Mitchell get extended? That's not going to happen. Yeah, Elijah Mitchell is, they still have 2 more years on his contract. So not a discussion at all about that. Brunel Jacobs wants to know, as far as defensive coordinators go, what about Brian Flores? I like Brian Flores as well. The guy's he's a defensive coach. I thought he did a good job in Miami as a head coach. I thought he got the short end of the stick with what happened down there. I do find it interesting that his 9-8 season was as good as the genius of Mike McDaniel down there this year. Brian Flores as a defense coordinator for the 49ers would be another one. It's a guy who I think is a stand-up guy, willing to stand up for what he believes in with what he did with the NFL and that whole situation that went down with Miami when he was let go. He seems like he's a bright football mind as well. Bring in Brian Flores if you can. So there's some really good names out here for Steve Wilks, Unlin, which was brought up by Black 59 Razor, and then Brunel Jacobs with Flores. I like all 3 of those names. The one thing that I'll say on this, as the 49ers get ready to make this decision, Kyle Shannon's hired 2 defense coordinators since his time here, being hired as the 49ers head coach. Robert Saleh, 4 years head coach. He's replaced by D'Amico Ryans, who has never had that kind of a position before, and it only takes 2 years for D'Amico Ryans to become a head coach. Ryans was interviewed after 1 season as a coordinator last year and decided to come back to the 49ers. So I think when you look at who they bring in, I think it's likely that they're going to bring in somebody who is going to be able to get the job done because that's what they've done so far. Let's see, just kind of looking through some of the questions. Want to make sure I haven't missed anything before we go over to the next one. I'm going to stay on the defensive side, though, depending on the questions that are coming in. Sorry, I'm just going through it really quick. Just wanted to check and see. I think I hit them. Cam, I think I got that one. Let's move on. As far as the press conference yesterday, another one. Emmanuel Mosley. Mosley, remember, injuring his knee out in Carolina. I believe that was week 6. According to Lynch and Shanahan, he is rehabbing. He's doing really well. And that's an interesting one for the 49ers. He's going to be a free agent, unrestricted free agent. It'll be interesting to see what kind of market there is for Emmanuel Mosley coming off of that knee injury, and how active the 49ers want to be in that market. I think is something that is interesting to me. You look at it, and when he went down, it looked like things might get tough for the 49ers for a little bit, but Emmanuel Mosley plays at such a high level. And at the same time, Deommodore Lenoir stepped into that role following the injury to Emmanuel Mosley. And I felt like Deommodore Lenoir played at a high level this year. I felt like Deommodore Lenoir was definitely better than what they got out of Ambry Thomas last year when Thomas was put into that position because of injuries. I felt like Deommodore Lenoir really stepped up and played well there. So if you can bring him back in Emmanuel Mosley to pair up again alongside of Travarius Ward, you already have Lenoir under contract, only going into year 3. If you can make it work under the salary cap, you do it. You can't have enough guys. We saw that last year for this last season. Remember the 49ers tried to do this with Jason Verrett, bringing him back, giving him a shot just to, it didn't work out for him, but you bring guys in, you let them, the more guys, if you can fit them in and you can make it work on the salary cap, the better your depth, the better your team is. The 49ers had an extremely deep team, which played a big role in how good they were this season and how deep they went into the playoffs. So Emmanuel Mosley, if he's able to come back, you bring him back. Bring back Mosley, and Lenoir, we'll see what happens there. Rashad says that you should put him at nickel. He really struggled at nickel last year. Deommodore Lenoir, he didn't play very well at nickel back. He was much better on the outside if you look at the numbers. But they also have a rookie there as well, and Samuel Womack. So where's his future going to be? Those are some of the questions to keep an eye on as we go through. And then Drake Jackson. What is there to say about Drake Jackson? The top pick in the draft of the 49ers at the end of round 2. Had a pretty good start to the season. Had 6 sacks over the course of or 3 sacks, excuse me. I keep getting those numbers confused. 3 sacks for Drake Jackson over the course of the first 6 weeks. And then only played more than 15 snaps once over the final 4 regular season games, and had no sacks after that week 6 period. Really fell off the cliff. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch talking about it yesterday, about how he just, I think, got wore out. He needs to get stronger. He needs to build himself up. It's a long grind of a season, and he definitely hit that wall. And you saw it with the lack of playing time that he was given. You saw it with Drake Jackson not being active for any of the playoff games. I think there's some things to like about Drake Jackson, but again, I don't know about that. Can Drake Jackson replace Samson Ebukam? This is a tough one. I think that's their hope. I think that was their hope. Ebukam, this brings up a really interesting question, because I think Samson Ebukam's a solid defensive end. He's a really good all-around player. Really good against the run. Only 5 sacks this year. It's a career high. His career high coming into this year was 4.5. He got 5. You look at the 49ers defense, and the thought process around their defense is that they're built off of a pass rush. And they do a good job of putting pressure on quarterbacks. I think their quarterback hit number was right around the same number of quarterback hits as the Philadelphia Eagles. But the difference is the Eagles are putting quarterbacks on their back. The 49ers aren't. The 49ers had Nick Bosa at 18 and a half sacks. Outside of Nick Bosa, they didn't have anybody over 5. It was Nick Bosa at 18 and a half, and then Samson Ebukam at 5, Charles Omenihu at 4.5, and Drake Jackson, the rookie that we're talking about here, was actually the 4th most sacks on the 49ers with only 3. So they were really top heavy there with Nick Bosa. If Nick Bosa wasn't getting home, they weren't getting home with consistency from any other single player. It was kind of a little bit of a round table of guys getting there, but you look at them, they're above average in the NFL, obviously, but nowhere near the level of a Philadelphia Eagle team and the 70 sacks that team put up. So they have room to grow at this defense, at this position. A lot of that is going to depend on what Drake Jackson can do. He's going to have to come back stronger and healthier than he was this year. Not that there was a health issue necessarily, but that's all part of it. Being strong and healthy kind of go hand in hand. So that's what we're going to have to see from Drake Jackson if he's going to step up. Otherwise, they're going to have to bring somebody in where it's going to be very similar to what we saw this season. And then I'm going to wrap it up tonight with Kyle Shanahan and his comments and what he said at the end of the press conference, because he was asked about the injuries at the quarterback position. And I'll say this, a couple of things, because I've been questioned about it. I talked about it already here. When you look at Kyle Shanahan, I didn't like his game plan against Philadelphia early on. I saw where it went eventually. I just didn't, a lot of what they did on series 3 through late in the first half were much better than what they had early on. They saw what was happening to them and they adjusted, but it took them too long to adjust because they had already got into trouble. I look at Kyle Shanahan, and this is a guy who I've really come to think that he's a good coach. I struggled with him a little early on in his career, thought that he managed games poorly. Still think that there's times I thought Sunday was a situation where the game was managed poorly. But I don't blame Kyle Shanahan for the issues as far as the quarterbacks go. It's an interesting one because if you get into it, you dig into the numbers here a little bit. Kyle Shanahan went through 4 quarterbacks this year. And what he said at the podium yesterday was right. The first one, the last one. Not sure how you protect Josh Johnson. If you're Kyle Shanahan, you call a drop back pass, your right guard gets beat. He gets hit while he's throwing, and just really, that's an unfortunate situation, but I don't know how you change that. Because that wasn't a situation where they put him in a that was a drop back pass, but it wasn't a slow developing play. The injury to Brock Purdy, that's a little bit different. I think that's a little bit of a slower developing play. I think just at that time in the game, it was a poor choice to go in that direction. Looking at the other part of that game, you look at the Jimmy Garoppolo one, the Jimmy Garoppolo injury from this year. It's a blitzing linebacker. They're sliding in the other direction. He gets through. If Jimmy Garoppolo just gets sacked on that play, if Jimmy Garoppolo just takes the sack, he's not injured. Jimmy Garoppolo tries to fight to stay going and gets rolled up on. An injury similar to what happened, kind of a tackle similar to the tackle you saw from Jimmy Ward against the Cowboys running back in the divisional round game. The Trey Lance one, Trey Lance, he feels as a dual threat quarterback. They're going to run him. You got to run him. It's an unfortunate play. I don't think that he was injured because of the play call. I don't think he was injured because of the play design. The execution on that play created a pile. And because of the pile with Mclinchey, Trent Williams was a little bit late getting over where he needed to go. And the timing of that whole thing got thrown off, so you get the hit by the linebacker and you get the roll up. So, it's that one. Jimmy Garoppolo got sacked and injured the year before because the left guard got beat against the Jets, right? So that's how he got hurt in 2020. 2021, Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured because he holds on to the ball too long. George Kittle gets beat, sack, injury. And then because of the injury, he gets injured worse out in Dallas in the wild card game because he's trying to keep his thumb from getting hurt worse. So, I don't blame Kyle Shanahan for the injuries. I think Kyle Shanahan does a really good job. Do I think that Kyle Shanahan should be fired? No. Should Kyle Shanahan have had a little bit better game plan to open up the game against Philadelphia? Absolutely. And I've been trying to state as much. I think people think that I don't like the guy or that I'm blaming him for the injury, which isn't the case. But Kyle Shanahan is a high-level NFL coach, and there's a point where they might have to replace him, but it's not yet. Aussie Roll says Brent Jones, Dante Whitner both said the tight end blocking scheme was wrong, and I agree with both those guys. Now, again, I understand that play is one that is a normal play in the 49ers playbook. I understand that. I don't need to be told that. I watch the games every week. I break down the film every week. I have experience with this stuff outside of just being a writer prior to doing all this. I've been around football longer than quite a few other folks that do this. And I understand that it's a normal football play. I also understand that when you're in a game, that one of the things that you need to take into consideration when you're building your game plan as an offensive coach is your opponent. And what do they do well? What do we do well? What do they do well that's going to give us trouble? What do we do well that can give them trouble? And it should have been noted early on before they got to play 5 that the way that they were attacking up front, which is very similar to what they've always done. And they need to be getting upfield. So, they get upfield. And that Hassan Reddick wasn't paying attention to the run. He didn't care about anything in terms of run. He was getting upfield. He was attacking and so on. So those are my thoughts on it. I don't blame him. I don't for the injury, but I don't like the scheme in terms of that opponent. Having that scheme against everything you do works better against some teams than others. Slow developing, play action passes against a team that came into the game with 70 sacks, 75 sacks if you include the divisional round. A slow developing play. I just don't see that in the beginning of the game. It was not only that, it was, hey, we're going to show them this formation and we're going to run. Cool. We're going to show them this formation and we're going to throw. Cool. Okay, we're going to show them that same formation again, and this time we're going to run. All right. Now, because we've shown them this formation and thrown and run, they're not going to know what we're going to do. So we're going to play action and we're going to get a shot play. And yeah, it worked. I know why Brandon Ayuk was open, because Philadelphia bet that they were going to get to the quarterback before the ball could get out to the open receiver that was going to most likely get open. They bet on themselves and they won. And the 49ers played into their hands because the 49ers felt like they were going to get it. Did Brock Purdy hold on to the ball a little bit too long? If he did, we're talking about just it's so close. And again, the play's all broken down here on the channel, so go ahead and take a look at it. But there you have it. Quick show, kind of a long show actually. Me just talking by myself, giving you my thoughts on going through it, letting you all know what you probably already heard once before, but giving you my thoughts on it. And hopefully you enjoyed it. I agree, like I said, with Jones and Whitner here. I also think that it doesn't mean that I feel like Kyle Shanahan's a bad coach. So just want to make sure you understand that that's out there as well. I just I appreciate everybody that comes on and watches the shows. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'll be on here with Rohan Chakravarthy from 49ers Web Zone. We're going to be chopping up a bunch of the 49ers talk. We'll be doing that tomorrow afternoon. But keep an eye out on the channel. There's going to be updates throughout the off season as things come through. Not even you'll have the long form live shows like this, but I'll be trying to also get out shorter shows, not even shows necessarily, but just content. So if you are on YouTube quite a bit, please subscribe to the Jack Hammer channel. You'll get plenty of all your 49ers news and updates will be here. There's some other great ones as well. Aussie Rules, thank you so much. He says, thanks, Jack. Good watch. Thank you. I haven't seen you on here before, and I really appreciate it. So if you guys, before you head out, though, hit that like button for me. That's the most important thing that you can do for us in terms of helping grow the channels. And then also hit that subscribe button. So like, subscribe. Keep it locked in here to the channel. Like I said, there'll be another show tomorrow with Rohan during the afternoon, but you can check that out at any time. And then it's going to be throughout the off season. 49ers never stop. We'll slow it down a little bit in the off season, but it's a never stop kind of thing. So appreciate everybody for taking the time to join in. You guys are fantastic. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be talking to y'all soon. Take care, everybody.